detention, and the near total erasure of civic space. Tens of thousands remain behind bars. Journalists, activists, lawyers, and ordinary citizens may detained without trial under vague accusations like spreading false news or belonging to a terrorism group. Freedom of expression is under attack in Egypt now. The judiciary lacks independency, and the case recycling is being used as a legal tactics to keep detainees imprisoned indefinitely. Yet, despite this grim reality, there are individuals and organizations continue to monitor, report, and fight for justice. Today, we are joining by three of them. Ahmed Atallah, Executive Director of the Egyptian Front of Human Rights, here with us in person, who will speak on the targeting of the human rights defender and the situation in the country when it's coming to the national dialogue and the tactics that the government is taking now in Egypt. In online, we have Muhammad Lotfi, the executive director of the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom, who will address the situation of the enforced disappearances and torture and the situation inside the detention facilities in Egypt. And Osama Muhammad Olu, Egypt Research at the Committee for Justice, who will share data and insight regarding the situation for labor rights in Egypt. Let's begin these important discussions. I will now hand the floor to Ahmed Atallah. Please, Ahmed.
Thanks, Ahmed, and thanks, FG, for this opportunity and the invitation to participate in this event. My intervention will focus on the 2 points related to the governmental initiatives claiming improvement in the human rights situation. Firstly, I'll focus on the gaps of the national dialogue and national human rights strategy. Regarding the national strategy for human rights, despite the establishment of new prisons as part of the strategy to improve detention conditions, Egyptian Front for Human Rights, other human rights organizations documented several violations inside the new prisons, including visit prohibition, inhuman treatment, and lack of medical care. Regarding the fair trial, contrary to the claims of Egyptian authorities that the drafted criminal procedure could aim to promote criminal justice, the drafted law undermines several human rights principles for defendants, such as the right to defense. And despite the lifting the emergency law, the Egyptian authority expanded civilian trials before military courts in accordance with amendment to the law on the protection of public and vital facilities. It also amended the anti-terrorism laws to increase the penalty for violating counter-terrorism measures taken by the state, replacing fines with life sentences in accordance with the emergency law. Regarding the torture, contrary to the Egyptian authorities' claims that they conducted investigations against police officers accused and convicted of torture allegations, in 2022, a number of human rights organizations demanded an investigation into the suspected death of economic researcher Ayman Hadhoud due to torture after his family received news of his death 2 months after his arrest by security. At the time, the prosecution closed the investigation into the case without determining the real cause of this death and without holding anyone accountable. In the same context, the court sentenced 9 people to life imprisonment because of leaking a video showing that they have been subjected to torture in First Al Salam police station. All accused were also placed on terrorist lists and placed under police surveillance for 5 years. On the other hand, regarding the national dialogue and the presidential pardon committee that actually like started to claim that there is improvement in human rights situation. So despite the reactivation of the presidential pardon committee alongside the call for the national dialogue, it has been like marked by extreme delay and lack of steadiness. And after 2 years of the committee work from April 2022, there is at least more than 2,500 individuals detained in cases related to the political opinions we released. And also, um, sorry for that. Yeah, more than 2,500 individuals detained in cases related to political opinions were released, either through bails or presidential pardons. In contrast, like more than 6,800 individuals who are part of numbers faced investigation by the Supreme State Security Prosecution during the same period on various charges. Regarding the national dialogue, several urgent and rights uh, and public freedoms committee in the national dialogue, and participants in the committee didn't discuss the issue or use even this term enforced disappearance in their discussions. Among the issues also were like that were completely ignored in the significant expansion of the by the Egyptian government in implementing the death penalty, reaching like the high level in the country history. Also, the issue of discrimination based on sexual orientation was completely ignored within the committee work, and also the practice of rotation was also ignored in this discussion. By the way, rotation means that, adding dependence on other or new cases based on similar accusations to make them to make that they will remain in the prison as long as they. So in the second part of my intervention, I'll focus on um, the examples of repressions, especially against the freedom of assembly and association that combine the uh, since um, 21. Okay. So regarding the last presidential elections that took place in 2024, human rights organizations have monitored the arbitrary arrest for more than 100 citizens who participated in opposition electoral campaign, and is as defendant in state security cases, they are prosecuted under charges such as joining terrorist groups and publishing false news. And an additional 20, more than 20 citizens have already been sentenced, including Ahmad Tantawi, a former prospective presidential candidate who have been sentenced to 1 year imprisonment for seeking to peacefully participate in the electoral process. Related to the economic crisis in Egypt, the Human Rights Organization documented the arbitrary arrest and enforced disappearance and accusation of terrorism charges of several citizens for expressing their opinions regarding the economic situation in Egypt on social media. By the way, there is a UN special UN special procedure communication was sent to the government concerning the arrest of the citizens due to expressing their opinions about the economic situation in Egypt on social media through Facebook posts and TikTok videos. It was sent in last July, but the government actually didn't respond so far on this communication. Furthermore, the Human Rights Organization monitored the arrest of more than 100 citizens whom the state security prosecution charged them with joining terrorist group, participating in illegal assembly, committing a terror act, and vandalism, just only for participating on protest in solidarity with Gaza. this protest that took place in October 2023. So finally, in connection to calls for protest during COP27 in Egypt in 2022, Egyptian authorities arrested at least 700 individuals across 18 cities between October and November 2022. The authorities also targeted them for responding to call for not just for calling, but also for responding to calls for anti-government protest circulating on social media in this time. Amid an economic crisis triggered by a dramatic currency devaluation, the authorities also detained most of them under terrorism-related charges. Citizens were subjected to enforced disappearance for varying periods and then brought before the state security prosecution with forged arrest reports. The security agent also were stopping them in the streets, like forcing them to search their smartphone, even without any responsible suspicion, including their social media platforms, their Facebook or Twitter accounts or something like that, or even personal messages and photos in public places in search for evidence of their involvement in political activities or criticism of this government. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed. I will now give the floor to Muhammad. Muhammad, are you here? Yes. Muhammad Lutfi?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Muhammad, based on your work with the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedom, how would you describe the current situation inside Egypt prisons, particularly with regard to overcrowding, denial of medical care, and the use of solitary confinement? How conditions is in the Egyptian? If you could describe or give image to our colleagues here about the prison conditions in Egypt. The floor is you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I wish I could make it to Gambia and be with you, but I had travel constraints and I couldn't make it to be with you physically. First of all, the prisoners' conditions in Egypt are very, very tough. Contrary to what the Egyptian government wants to promote as PR of new prisons with wonderful equipments and medical equipments and stuff like that, and the reality is very different. Those prisons, be it new or old, are completely under the control of national security officers. So a prison might have new equipment to treat prisoners who have diseases or chronic diseases. However, those prisoners, because they are political prisoners, because they are under the supervision of and orders of national security officers, they will not get the treatment. They will be denied the medical care. They will be denied visits from their families and the ability to communicate directly with their families. The situation is so drastically, depressing for those prisoners that many cases of attempted suicide have happened over the past 2 years, and this is a new phenomena that we have been monitoring. Desperation of prisoners has led them to the point of breaking down psychologically and wanting to take their own lives. And this is a very dangerous situation. Obviously, some other prisoners do show their discontent and call for their rights to be respected. And by, for example, a recent example was for prisoners who appear in front of courts via video conference. They turn their back to the camera as a symbol of their protest against the inability of those courts to deliver justice, because they cannot find a judge that is gonna examine the legality of the detention. And Ahmed has mentioned recycling. A lot of those prisoners are people who have spent years and years beyond the maximum period of pretrial detention according to Egyptian law, and remain in prison, accused of the same accusations, or were ordered release by a court at some point, and then were accused in new cases in what we call a rotation. And so what we have in Egypt currently, be it in prisons or for the situation of prisoners in general as a detainee, is a lack of faith that the judiciary is able to deliver justice, that the habeas corpus is being applied, that as a prisoner I'm able to challenge the legality of the detention. And as you said, indefinite detention leads to desperation and breakdown of the will of the prisoners, their dignity, their health, and a lot of them simply die out of, after a few years of medical. If you have diabetes or heart disease or kidney disease or lung issues or whatever, these are if untreated over a long period of time, people just simply die under those conditions. One of the reasons prisoners are sort of showing their anger at the moment at judges and in video conference sessions with courts is because they want to hug. They want to hug. Yeah, you listened well. They want to hug their relatives when they come to visit them. If you haven't, if you have a son who comes and visits you over 6, 7 years, and you see him growing up, but you are not allowed to physically hug your son or your daughter or your relatives, brother, father, etc. That's all what they're asking for. They're not asking for much. Able to hug their relatives. Can the Egyptian government do that? Bear in mind that since 2020, Corona, that's 5 years ago, Corona was 5 years ago. Since 2020, prisoners are allowed one visit a month for 20 minutes by one, exceptionally sometimes two visitors. And this is in contravention with the prisons regulation and the prisons law. A pretrial detainee should be able to have one visit every week by 3 persons and for 1 hour. So if the excuse back in 2020 was Corona, well, I have news for you. Corona is over. Can we go back at least to the regular visits of once a week for pretrial detainees and once every 2 weeks for convicts? So what we see at the moment, Mifrah, is I think we need to toll the bell and say that some tragedies might happen in Egyptian prisons, in particular Badr 3 prison, where prisoners are starting to show signs of resistance to the arbitrariness they live in, to the continued detention they live in, to the lack of visits, lack of medical care, etc. And if we don't want to wake up in the morning one day and find that some tragedy has happened in one of Egyptian prisons. So the Egyptian authorities, the African Commission, experts in Africa, if you can toll the bell with us and tell the authorities, hey, people are killing themselves now in those prisons. You have to be aware that some, simple measures, such as allowing more visits, allowing judges to examine the cases uh, properly, and review the detention legality of the detentions under those vague terrorism accusations. These simple measures might give some hope to prisoners that maybe there is something there that they can hang on to and not do something bad to themselves or lead to a confrontation situation in the prison. In terms of numbers, just take 2024 as a snapshot. We have had over 2,200 new arrests of political prisoners and only 1,000 releases. So if anything, now we have more political prisoners than beginning of 2024. And over 1,200 were rotated. Okay, that's not to speak about those who have spent more than the maximum period of pretrial detention, which is 2 years, according to the current Code of Prisoner Procedures. And Ahmed has pointed out to those protesters or attempted protests back during COP27. As you said, Ahmed, there are roughly 800 people who have spent now over 2 years in detention on the back of the same case beyond the maximum period of pretrial detention, never referred to trial, and are desperate to join their families. Most recently, we have seen in 2024, towards the second half of 2024, state security prosecutors referring to court, over 130 cases referred to court for trial in front of two criminal courts, terrorism circuits, and so those who are now referred to court, and here I quote one of our colleagues, Ibrahim Azzeddin, who's a housing rights researcher. When he learned that he is gonna stand trial, he's in absentia. Fortunately, he has been able to leave the country. But Ibrahim Azzeddin, I quote him, he say, "My referral to trial in Egypt is further evidence that the regime is not satisfied with the violation I have already endured, including losing 3 years of my life in prison and being subjected to torture. Instead, it continues its repressive policies by using the judiciary as a tool to eliminate dissent. This trial is not just a legal procedure, it is part of a broader strategy to silence voices and intimidate activists and human rights defenders, even those dedicated to advocating economic and social and cultural rights." So, as a victim of torture, as a victim of 3 years prolonged detention, as a victim of rotation and enforced disappearance, now he's supposed to stand trial, while those who tortured him or made him disappear or ordered his prolonged detention were never asked or questioned about those violations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for your intervention and for your explanation regarding the situation in Egypt detention center and the situation regarding the political detainees. And now I will give the floor to Osama. But Osama, do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Osama, the labor situation in Egypt rarely receives the attention it deserves, despite serious and ongoing violation. Could you, from the recent research or recent report for CFJ 2024 situation for labor rights in Egypt, what are the most concerning developments affecting workers' right in Egypt now? And how are the independent unions and labor activists navigating their rights with the government? Could you give our colleagues here insights about this important issue?
Yes, definitely. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone in Banjul and elsewhere. I would start by raising few concerns which were raised by Egypt's new 2024 labor law, and I would focus on the right to strike and union independence. So, start, we could say that Egypt's new 2024 labor law is being presented by the government as he said as a modern update of the old 2003 law, but in reality, it reinforces restrictions and keeps workers under tight control from both business owners and the state. So instead of improving protections to workers, it makes it harder for workers to express their opinions, call for their rights, or to organize or go on a strike. And one of the biggest problems is how the new law makes it nearly impossible to legally strike for workers. The way it is now is that workers have to go through a long, complicated process, starting with submitting a request, getting approval in advance, and waiting for a very long time. Of course, the requests they made are most of the time ignored or delayed on purpose. These steps make the strikes almost impossible to carry out. even though the right to strike is protected by international agreements that Egypt has signed, including the African Charter and the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. Another serious concern is how the new law, keeps trade unions under tight state control, especially under the control of the security forces. It continues to limit the formation of independent unions by making the registration very, very difficult. Authorities have now too much power to deny or cancel a union's license for vague reasons or without providing a reason. And in practice, only one state-aligned union federation is really allowed to operate. But the problem goes beyond just legal wording. We are now seeing a clear pattern, or let's say clear examples of retaliation against workers and union leaders who try to stand up for their rights. I will give few examples. We just monitored and documented recently. Shadi Muhammad, a well-known labor activist, he was arrested and forcibly disappeared after years of being targeted for organizing a protest. To give context, he was previously fired from his job in 2019 for demanding fair wages for himself and for his colleagues. And since then, he was being harassed and followed until he was arrested. In another case, in October 2024, 6 workers were arrested after attending a conference to support people who had been fired unfairly from their jobs. 5 of them were kept in detention just for speaking up until now. Also, we documented just recently workers at Samanut Textile who went on strike over unpaid wages. They were punished by having their salaries cut, and some were suspended without proper process. Even the chairman of the company launched a verbal attack on female workers after both male and female workers stopped working for only half an hour to demand the remains of their March salaries. The last example is we also documented a sit-in. This sit-in was we documented a sit-in which included almost 1,800 workers at the National Greenhouse Company. The workers were demanding the implementation of the national wages council decision, which to increase their salaries to 7,000 Egyptian pound, as their current average salaries are 3,500 Egyptian pounds. And to give you context, this is equivalent to $70. So instead of safeguarding the workers' rights, security forces came and arrested several of them. The public prosecution charged the workers with gathering, disrupting production, and resisting authorities. And they are now being tried. The problem is that even the Ministry of Manpower does not help workers or listen to their complaints. In fact, sometimes they even help employers oppress workers even more. They are just like the examples I give are just a few cases, but they show a clear pattern that the state is not only failing to protect workers' rights, it is actively punishing those workers who try to claim the rights or call for them. So to sum up, the new law does not bring real reform. It blocks the right to strike, limits union freedom, and allows the government to crack down on any workers who challenge the system. This stands in direct violation of Egypt's obligation under regional and international human rights law. And as civil society, we need to keep raising the workers' voices to push for genuine protections for them, not just on paper, but most importantly in practice for all the workers in Egypt. Should I now touch base on how can civil society and international partners
Yes,
effectively
this is will
document?
be the second round. Let us
Okay.
let us back now to Ahmed again. And Ahmed, yesterday we heard the Egyptian delegation here in Banjul claim that the government, Egypt government, is fully respects the human rights, and the situation in human rights in Egypt is stable. Based on your documentation and how you respond to the this narrative to the Egyptian government, we could respond to them and give insights about what they are saying, and what does the reality on the ground actually look like, practically for journalists, activists, and detainees.
Thanks, Ahmed. As I mentioned in my first intervention, actually, despite the governmental initiatives claiming that there is like an improvement in the human rights situation. Okay. But actually, what happens on the ground is the opposite. We still see that there is like repression against human rights defenders, lawyers, journalists, businessmen, political activists, and TikTokers, vloggers. Actually, a lot of segment of people actually still face the repression, even after like launching the National Human Rights Strategy, which contains a lot of elements that saying that this is our promises to improve the human rights situation as part of the propaganda or like whitewashing campaigns that organized by the government in the last 3 years, which actually we can say that it's achieved some success internationally. But on the ground, actually, we see actually the violations are still ongoing. And if I can give like some examples of the categories of people that I mentioned. There is like someone called Yahya Hassan Abdel Hadi. Yahya Hassan Abdel Hadi is the former spokesperson of the civil democratic movement in Egypt. This is one of the remarkable and prominent movements in Egypt now, and one of the one of the most important opposition group. He is actually arrested and detained since August 2024, just because he criticized the regime and just wrote just a criticism on the regime. I just try to remember what he mentioned. I think he mentioned that he or bought something related to the military, and military should take an action towards the regime, etc. So after just he posted about that, he was arrested and detained so far. Even he is more than 60 years old. We have also another case called Huda Abdelmenam. Huda Abdelmenam is a woman human rights defender. She's actually detained since 2018, and after she finished her sentence, it was five years old in prison. She was rotated in 2 cases, and after that, now here one of her cases already were referred to the circuit courts, and actually I think it will be started in this, if I remember. And also, Menam, she actually faced a lot of violations inside her detention facility. Also face medical negligence. Actually, there is a lot of to waste the time, but I can make some names like Ashraf Abdelmenam. He's a cartoonist and a journalist. Also, he was arrested just because he painted cartoons criticizing also the regime policies, etc. And enforces appeared and tortured during after his arrest and before appearing before the Supreme State Security Prosecution, and also he's detained now on the same accusations. Actually, those people actually who are presented in before the security prosecution actually usually accused on joining terrorist group, publishing false news, committing terrorism act, etc. So, I try to list some names like Ala Abdel Fattah, Muhammad Adil, Muhammad Oxygen, Hamd Zaim, Muhammad Hassan, Abdelmenam Abdel Futuh, Ahmed Siraj, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for your answer and for the situation regarding especially the political detainees in Egypt. I will back now to Muhammad Lotfi. Muhammad, uh, I have a question to you. Given the lack of accountability at the national level in Egypt, especially in enforced disappearances and the torture and the arbitrary detention, of course. From your experience, how important are regional and international mechanisms in pushing for justice for the victim in Egypt? And what challenges Egyptian human rights organization face when trying to engage with the bodies like the African Commission or the UN Human Rights Mechanism? Could you give your explain more and give your answer regarding this?
Obviously, enforced disappearances and torture in Egypt, as noted repeatedly by the UN Committee Against Torture, torture in Egypt is both systematic and widespread, which means the committee does not say that explicitly, but between the lines, one can assert that this could amount, those violations being systemic and systematic and widespread, they could amount to crimes against humanity. And that opens the door to potential litigation in some countries which have judicial systems that either examine cases of torture, regardless of where they occurred, under some conditions, of course, or crimes such as crimes against humanity. It's very difficult. One, there is high risks for the victims or their families from reprisal. And we have seen this in the case of Muhammad Sultan, who is a victim of torture, who was detained in a prolonged period, who is a US citizen, and who tried to sue the Egyptian government in the US, but had nephews and uncles and relatives in Egypt arrested as a reprisal against his legal action in the US. When it comes to regional, the UN mechanism, of course, are very important, and we have seen the UPR of Egypt in January this year. A lot of very important recommendations were made that address specifically torture and enforced disappearances. It's a symbolic and political message that tells the Egyptian government, hey, you have to do a bigger effort there to hold to account who perpetrate those crimes, or those grave crimes. But it's not a legal judgment. It's not a judicial body, and therefore we were hopeful that maybe the African Commission for Human and People's Rights could be the venue. However, we noticed, and we have had some experiences, engaging with African Commission. There are a lot of time delays in the cases, and it makes the victims themselves or their families feel that maybe this is not an effective way to seize the African Commission, and would rather go for a communication or a statement on an urgent action from one of the UN special procedures, and the two are mutually exclusive, as you know. So what we wish to see at the regional level, at least for the African regional bodies to be stronger, to have the resources, to have the manpower and woman power, experts who are able to examine promptly the complaints and the communications. We have many victims who wish, in theory, to seize the African Commission, or the bodies and the mechanism of the African Commission. However, they are worried, one, from reprisals. Two, will the African Commission care about our cases in the first place? And this is something that we need to be honest in replying to the victims and tell them, well, there is nothing guaranteed. We will try. We do our best, but it would help us hugely if the African Commission shows that it is ready and willing to engage the Egyptian government in the cases that we are presenting to them, and brush aside politics. This is not this is a human rights commission. There is politics always involved, but it can't be that much. It shouldn't be that much to the point where we are not sure if we should advise our victims to go to the African Commission because of lack of answer, because of lack of engagement on the subject of Egypt, and it has to do with credibility and trust. So I hope the African Commission can address this worry quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Muhammad, for your answer. Now I will back to Osama. Osama, regarding especially regarding the labor rights. So my question to you is, how can civil society and international partners effectively document labor rights violation in Egypt? This violation, which are now in a high repressive environment, like Egypt, where surveillance, legal threats, and restrictions on organizing make fact finding so difficult. So, especially after what you say in your first intervention about the difficulties that is faced to the laborers in Egypt, especially the one who is try to defend labor rights. So could you give us insight about that and answer this question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you once again. Well, this is another important question because in a country like Egypt, documenting labor rights violations is not just difficult, it can be also very dangerous to who are working on documentation and to the workers who are speaking. So we know for a fact that the space for civil society in Egypt is shrinking, as our colleagues have just mentioned. Many organizations were forced to stop their work, many face different kinds of pressures or even arrest. So in this, as you said, like in a highly repressive environment such as Egypt, how can we still monitor and report what is happening to workers? Well, first thing is we need to rely more on informal networks, meaning trusted contacts on the ground. This can be like, for example, a former union leaders, journalists, or even workers themselves who are willing to share what is happening. But we first must ensure and make sure that they are protected by using secure communication tools and keeping their names out of the public records. Second thing is, even when it's hard to speak openly, anonymous testimonies and indirect documentation can be still be very useful. For example, like tracking patterns of arrests or labor protests in the media. For example, we can track how many strikes were stopped by force, how many workers were fired in a specific period after speaking out, for example. So these details help us show the bigger picture. It helps us see if there is a systematic pattern of repression. The third thing is use civil society organizations and NGOs who are based outside Egypt. So they can play a big and important role. Exiled organizations, or as we call them, diaspora communities, can collect testimonies from workers who fled the country and who are now feel more safe to talk or have more freedom to talk. They can also submit, using this information, they can submit complaints to regional and international bodies such as the UN and African human rights bodies on behalf of those inside Egypt. And they also can advocate for them and raise their voices, which is similar to what we are doing here today. Another thing is that can be done. We can use technology and open source tools. For example, analyzing social media posts, verifying photos or videos of protests, or even using satellite images in some industrial zones. These tools can, of course, these tools does not replace the local voices of the workers themselves, but they can be used as a tool to support their testimonies and verify their stories. And finally, partnerships between organizations who are working on different kind of rights. For example, organization working on labor rights can collaborate with other organizations who are working on arbitrary detention cases, torture cases, freedom of expression, which is can be very powerful, because when we bring together different types of evidence, we make the case stronger. So it's true that documentation can be very risky, but it's also very important, because every strike broken, every activist being jailed, every factory protest, for example, punished by forcibly dispersed, it all matters, and it's our job to make sure that their stories don't stay hidden. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Osama. Thank you for your answer. I now give the floor to our colleagues here in the room. If there is any questions or comments to our panelists, please. This is the time now. You have the floor.
داخل بالعربي طيب اوكي انا لاحظت في التوصيات انه انتم مطالبين بتحسين الاوضاع في السجون بس في حين انه بالاوضاع اللي انا شايفاها بالنسبه للمعتقلين الهائله جدا، ما من ضمن التوصيات هي ايقاف القوانين بتاعت الاعتقال ذاتها والحد من الهجمات على الناشطين السياسيين او الانسانيين. ممكن افهم في البدايه ليه كده وبعد كده
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So it's Stephen Collins from. It's fine. Yeah. Stephen Collins from the International Commission of Jurists. Thank you for the panel discussion today. My question is, given how entrenched the rights abuses are in Egypt, have been going on, the impunity for enforced disappearance, impunity for torture that continues, and the difficulties that have been raised today concerning, is enforced under universal jurisdiction. What can we do? Because it's been going on for so long, and we've been submitting cases to the UN bodies for so long. We've had positive judgments from the UN bodies for so long. Egypt remains, unfortunately, a pivotal partner politically for the West, and I think that's part of the issue. What can we do? Is there anything that we need to be doing, differently? Is there, a political moment that's coming up in the near future that we can take advantage? Is there a need for CSOs to come together in a more coherent way in terms of the way that we deal with the issues in Egypt? I'm just interested to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions? So now I will back to our panelist. Each of you has 3 minutes. I can give 3 minutes to answer or to answer those questions. I will begin with you, with Ahmed, and after I will give the floor to Osama, and we'll final the thing with Lotfi.
Thank you very much. I'll answer your question regarding the laws. Actually, there is a lot of laws that you can consider them like problematic. We have many laws, many articles in the penal code actually punish people just for their like human rights work or even for their political activism. They will maybe find them themselves that they will like sentence it into 25 years or something like that. There's also other laws related to the terrorism, like anti-terrorism laws, terrorism entities laws, and anti-cyber crimes laws. Actually, the human rights organization actually keep talking about this problematic laws, and there is like a need to amend this laws, and sometimes like lift them. So the problem is that it's not. Of course, it's important to talk about this laws, and like requesting amending them, etc. But in my opinion, I think the problems are more related to the practices, especially by the security agencies, by the authorities, because actually what happened on the ground sometimes actually doesn't like align with the laws. So for example, if you are talking now about the prolonged pretrial detention, the maximum period of the pretrial detention is only 2 years. Actually, sometimes the state security prosecution or the courts actually doesn't respect this maximum period, and sometimes like extend the pretrial detention more than that. And also, as I talked, and also Muhammad mentioned, the rotation case actually like exemplify this violation. So it's not about the laws. Of course, it's important, but it's also about the practice. So the question is, how can we enforce or put real pressure on the government to change their practices? Thanks.
Thank you. Osama?
Yes, thank you. I think there was no questions about the labor rights in Egypt, and since we ran out of time, I will just be brief to say like few closing remarks. So I would just want us, I would want to leave us like with the same reminder that behind every labor law, behind every factory protest or sit-in, and every violations we have spoken about today, there are real people on the ground, working men and women, who are struggling not just for wages or jobs, but for their dignity. And the repression of labor rights in Egypt is not a legal issue only, it's a human rights issue. And it should be framed that way. Because when workers are denied the right to strike, organize, or speak, they are being denied their voice and their future. But what should give us hope is the fact that despite all these obstacles, the workers in Egypt continue to resist, they continue to speak, organize, and fight, even when it costs them their freedom. So our responsibility is to amplify their voices, protect their stories, and push every possible mechanism nationally and regionally and internationally to make sure justice reaches them. Thank you.
Thank you, Osama. So I will the final remarks with Lotfi, and if you Lotfi have answer regarding Stephen question.
Yes, so on the recommendations, we have worked hard to get many recommendations, positive recommendations on many topics that through the UPR review, the fresh recommendations have just come up in January this year in Geneva. Many states, and Ahmed can speak better than me about them. Some recommendations have to do with women's rights, refugees' rights, minorities, obviously prisoners as well, and also on legal amendments that need to happen. And so, yeah, I think as Egyptian Human Rights Organization, we have done what we could to get coverage of as many topics as possible through the UPR advocacy and the UPR reporting and the review process itself. And I hope we can use those recommendations to push for real reforms, where I agree with Ahmed, legal reforms are necessary, but in the absence of political will to enforce the laws, in the absence of rule of law, laws don't matter very much, I fear. And so Egypt is not exactly a country of rule of law. You would expect in countries where there is rule of law, you change the law and the practices change. In Egypt, it doesn't work like this, because instructions by a national security officers is much more important than the constitution itself, and that's the real problem of the absence of rule of law in Egypt. So I mentioned here the prison regulations about the visits. Well, we have issues with the prison regulation and the prison's law. We have issues, but if only it was implemented as it is, it would still be slightly better, or perhaps much better than where we are now. On the issue of accountability, I think from our friend from the ICJ, I mean, we work a lot, all of us with ICJ. We speak together, and we hope for a breakthrough, just like you. We know victims who want to find justice, and we know we've documented the violations. We do our homework, and hopefully with the help of the ICJ or other organizations, we can somebody will be held to account for enforced disappearances or torture. And by the way, on disappearance, there is a case in front of the African Commission for Human and People Rights. That's the Mustafa Najjar case, who is an MP, a former MP of Egypt, and we don't know where he is now. Since now 6 years, he disappeared. We don't know where he is, and we're asking for the African Commission to help us find answers from the government to reveal his whereabouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Lutfi. Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Ahmed, Atallah, for your participation today in our session, Egypt review in our country review day. Thank you very much for our colleagues here who participate with us today, and thank you. Final things to the victims, that they give us their consent, and also our colleagues who encouraging us to do what we can do to protect victims and to protect the human rights situation in Egypt and in North Africa countries, as well as Sahel country. Thank you very much for your participation, and look forward to meeting with you and to continue our work with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.